Well, looming U.S. tariffs continue to threaten businesses right across Canada. While U.S. President Donald Trump did grant a delay in his initial tariff plan, he's expected to announce 25% duties on all steel and aluminum imports later today. This is another escalation in his overhaul of American trade relationships. Joining us now live with more on how these tariffs could impact his city is Niagara Falls Mayor Jim Diodati. Mayor Diodati, good to talk to you this morning. When we set this up last week, we thought that there was a pause on the tariffs, but now these steel tariffs are coming in. You're very close to Hamilton. I know there's a lot of industry in Niagara Falls. What could these tariffs mean to your city?
Well, good morning, Nick. And of course, we're very, very concerned about what could happen. I mean, first of all, the most obvious is tourism. Right now, Niagara Falls being the #1 leisure destination in Canada, typically 25% of our visitation comes from Americans, and they represent 50% of the revenue into Niagara Falls. So we're concerned. And I know in Canada, it's not American sentiment, it's a pro-Canadian. And I think it's more about patriotism, and we don't want it to turn into tit for tat. Mm-hmm. And I've been already receiving calls from politicians in the U.S., mayors, county executives, a number of people that I sit on different international boards with saying, listen, you know, we love Canada, we love Canadians. Don't take this personal. This is all politics. We're really embarrassed and upset about this. And we're going to resume. We have it's called the Niagara 10, where the mayors on both sides of the border, we get together and we have regular get-togethers and discussions. We haven't done it since prior to COVID, but now our American friends want to resurrect it. And we want to show the bonds that keep us tight.
How challenging, though, is it, Mayor, with the sort of vagaries and sort of whims, it seems, almost of President Trump? You know, last week we thought we dodged this bullet on this sort of 30-day pause on the tariffs. And then, you know, overnight last night we find out, OK, suddenly these steel tariffs are coming in. The idea of planning around this, you know, moving ahead around this, how difficult does that make your job and the municipality's job there, you know, being so close to the border?
So it's extremely stressful for all political people. The premier was in town this weekend, and we were discussing, you know, President Trump is very mercurial. He's very unpredictable. And the other thing, you know, when I was younger, I went out and bought his book, The Art of the Deal, and I've studied the guy and the way he does things. He uses this shock and awe system and strategy of his negotiation. And sometimes I don't even know if the tariff is his goal, because if you look back to 1930, President Hoover brought in 20% tariffs, and at that time it was Ford. Henry Ford referred to it as economic stupidity because it dragged the U.S. from a recession into the Great Depression. So it'll affect the Americans in the same way it affects us. I think this is more about border security, the major fentanyl issue that we are dealing with, that there's a lot more to this story. And we know that it's being transported on ships and other vehicles, things that are not really properly being monitored. And that's why the premier announced helicopters for our police, for Windsor and for Niagara. We need to do more on border security, and also, of course, our 2% of GDP commitment to NATO. That's something we dropped the ball on. It's very unfortunate. I think this is Trump's way of tightening the screws to make sure that we honor these two things.
I'm also curious, because as Trump is tightening the screws, as you say, Mayor, it's also lowering our dollar. It's now trading around 69.7 cents U.S. In a lower Canadian dollar environment, does that potentially boost American tourism, though, when they're coming in and spending cheaper dollars? I'm certainly not advocating for a lower dollar, but I'm just curious about what that business impact can be.
You know, that's a great question, Nick, and you're exactly right, and that's the exact same thing we've been talking about. Typically, when there's a major currency fluctuation the way there is now, Americans will rush to the Canadian border because their dollar goes so much farther. And right now, with what's going on geopolitically, that's the question that we're asking ourselves. But I have to say, most of the Americans I talk to, they're still pro-Canada, pro-Canadians. They love Canada. I think we could be okay. We haven't seen any disruptions at the border or cancellations for conferences or hotel and travel trade. So far it's been good, but of course we're cautiously optimistic and hopeful that it'll be a robust tourist season with Americans coming.
Yeah, well, it's coming very fast, that season, and we'll see what happens with those tariffs. Niagara Falls Mayor Jim Diodati, appreciate the time here on CP24 Breakfast this morning. Thanks so much.